Hi, everyone. It's December holiday time. Welcome to our show. Welcome to Cooking with Chef Carole. My name is Wendy Sachs, and I'm on the board of Plant Powered Metro New York. And Plant Powered Metro New York is our delightful platform, our sponsor. This whole event, this whole series, 2.5 years, almost 3 years. Plant Powered Metro New York has been bringing you Cooking with Chef Carole. So Plant Powered Metro New York, and I always read this even though I'm well aware of what we do. Plant Powered Metro New York empowers people to achieve better health and overcome chronic disease through a whole food, plant-based approach to nutrition. We offer evidence-based education, resources, and support to create community and inspire change. Together with a wide network of grassroots leaders and organizers and educators who are terrific and volunteer, by the way, we raise awareness about the dramatic health benefits of whole food plant-based eating. We empower individuals to make their own lifestyle adjustments, as well as lead projects that spark changes in food policy, food practice, and food culture. So we're delighted to have you here. We're delighted to have you tune in. For those of you watching the replay, welcome. And as I said, we're into December. It's getting close to holiday time. Kale, lettuces, garlic, potatoes are all in bins and baskets at the farmer's market. And of course, apples and pears and all kinds of wonderful fall and winter vegetables and fruits. Carole will be using them shortly. As always, we encourage you to buy organic and ideally regenerative vegetables if you can get them, but if you can't, regular vegetables will do just fine. And quick announcements for Plant Powered Metro New York. We have our 21-day jumpstart coming up in January. It's January 5th is the orientation day. I can mention a little bit more about this in the announcements later, and we will put the links in the chat because we have a wonderful flyer that you can take a look at with all kinds of details, or you can go to our website. But for those of you who are looking to transition from a standard American diet into plant-based eating, or those of you who just want a little added support or a little more education, I highly, highly, highly recommend our Jumpstart. It's quite an educational and habit-changing 21 days. So I really encourage you to at least find out about it. And if you'd like, if it resonates, do go ahead and sign up. And tomorrow night, we have online our book club with Dr. Shilpa Ravella. The book is called The Silent Fire, The Story of Inflammation, Diet, and Disease. Again, you can find the information on the website, and I'll make other announcements as we get to the end of the program. So for those of you who did tune into the Plantathon and those of you who gave during our Plantathon, on Giving Tuesday, thank you, thank you, thank you. We are a not-for-profit organization, and any donation really goes a long way, particularly any donation between now and the end of the year. We have an angel donor who is doubling the match, so anything you give will be doubled. And I encourage you to please give generously this year between now and the end of the year if you can, and if you like the show, and if you would like to support the organization. And again, you can find donate information right on the website. So that's enough of announcements. Carole, what's on the menu today?
Oh, Wendy, thanks for the introduction. Nice to see you and everyone else. And boy, it's the end of the year already. I can't believe it. I do want to tell you that I've noticed when you were talking that my internet is a little funky. So if for some reason I pause or stop, I mean, just be patient. I'm here. I'm cooking away, and don't leave because I'm sure it's just a little wacky. I do live out in the middle of practically nowhere, so never quite sure about the stability of my connecting with the entire, the world via the internet. We are making today pot pies, which I find to be total comfort food. And, so much of our own food memories seem to come from our own childhood, right? Like you learn something from your grandmother or your mother, and those are your childhood memories. Well, this is my memory from my own adulthood. So, was making pot pies. It was something that I always did when I was married. Before I was, maybe I was already a vegetarian, but my husband fully ate turkey. And between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I quickly would make a lot of pot pies, and I would maybe make 20 or 30 of them in little teeny foil mini individual servings, and I would put the filling into these little foil containers, and I would wrap them with plastic, and into the freezer they would go. So they were like really quick lunch or dinner meals by just taking them out of the freezer and cooking them. And my husband would always get several different kinds of toppings to go with these pot pies that I would make. And one was we would use puff pastry. And again, I wasn't eating the turkey pot pie at the time, but I would cut circles of puff pastry. And you certainly can get vegan puff pastry, but I want to give you a warning that it's got a ton of oils in it and made with lots of fake ingredients. So I kind of stay away from that vegan puff pie, but it is presentable and very beautiful when the dough rises and you cook your frozen pie with the puff on the top. The other way was I would make a bunch of dough and I would make the crust, and instead of lining the pie pan at the bottom, I would just make crust for the top, and those would cook. And that's what we're going to make today. We're actually going to make whole wheat crust that goes on top of the pot pie. And then the other way that I would serve the pot pies for him, which he loved the most actually, was serving it with biscuits. So he would just cook the pot pie in the oven right out of the freezer, and then I would make a side of biscuits. Or he would put 2 pieces of toast in the toaster and just toast that and then put the filling on top, and it was as good as having pie crust. So we have a little bit of variations today, but our main goal is to make the pot pies. And if we have time, we're going to get to the vegan biscuits. So again, this is my own kind of in memory of, I want to say, of my old days of making hundreds of pot pies for my husband. So we're going to get we need to have a medium-sized pan, and I'm getting it on to what would be a medium flame if we had a flame. Right now I'm on an electric burner, so I'm just kind of setting it at medium or high, and the pan has been getting warm. The other thing is I have the oven on behind me, and that's set at 400 degrees. So that will be ready to put the pot pies in once we've got them all made. So, and I have no, what do I want to say? Explain. This is a recipe that I wrote down, but the fact is that it can really be anything of your choosing. It's vegetables and beans in a sauce, okay? And you can choose whether to have, you can put zucchini in it, you can put red peppers in it, you can put potatoes in it, but there are certain ingredients that I consider to be essential. Okay, and those are the ones I wrote down for you in the recipe. So what is essential? You need to have at least 1 medium onion, which is about a cup. And I've already chopped that, and we're gonna water, broth, saute it first. Okay, that's the first thing. You need to have onions. Okay, and then you need to have carrots and celery for sure. Okay, and then the other things that I feel are essential are having mushrooms, I have frozen peas and frozen corn. Those are the things. And then I have a huge amount of garlic, okay? Now, in the recipe, I wrote down that we need to have 1 heaping tablespoon, 2 tablespoons. I said 1 heaping tablespoon. Actually, you need 2 tablespoons. You need to have like 6 to 8 garlic cloves, okay? Now, we've talked a lot about this. Sometimes garlic cloves are really big, sometimes they're really teeny. So I think that the best way to know that you have the right amount of garlic is to chop it and then measure it. And I have 2 heaping tablespoons of garlic, okay? So what's gonna happen is, and then this gives me one chance to show you and remind you that I love using homemade vegetable stock or broth. You can call it either one. Setting up everything for yourself for this pie, you actually, when you're cutting your onions, you're cutting your celery, you're cutting your mushrooms, I even actually cut a few potatoes. The recipe doesn't call for potatoes, but you can add potatoes. So when I was peeling all these things, I actually put them in a big pot on the stove, covered it with water, maybe 2 or 3 inches of water over the vegetables. And while I was prepping all these things, I made a beautiful, beautiful stock. You can see it here, and I'm just draining it. And all these vegetables actually end up going into compost eventually. But I have a beautiful handmade broth that we're going to use to make our gravy, our sauce. So I'm going to just put that over here for now, but we are definitely going to use that. And I encourage you to buy, if you're going to have to buy vegetable broth in a box, you want to look on the label and try to buy the no salt, because they do put a lot of salt in those boxes, and you want to try to have no salt. So usually when you water broth saute, and I'm just going to move these vegetables, I actually put this far away from me, but I actually want it closer up. So this is going to just sit in the sink like this, because we're going to immediately, this is hot. And how do I know this is hot? I'm going to just actually get a little bit of a ladle. This is hot. And if I put a little bit of water or broth, you see this pan immediately sizzles. It is totally ready for our onion sauteing. So we are not using any oil, okay? We're not using any salt today. We're going to make sure that our flavors are all coming from herbs and spices. And I'm going to put a little bit of broth, just a quarter. This ladle is actually a quarter cup. And I'm just going to put a little bit, and that's going to get the onions starting to saute. And they're going to release their natural sugars in the onion. And I'm going to make sure that I get a spoon here. I have a wooden spoon. And this is nice and hot, and it's cooking the onions. And what we're looking for in the onions is we're looking for them to become translucent. That takes a good 5-6 minutes to do. I'm going to go ahead and put this big 2 tablespoons of garlic in. And this is a lot of garlic. And this recipe needs a lot of garlic, actually. So I'm going to get rid of that right now. And that's sauteing. And at this point, because it's on a medium-high flame, the onions are already starting to look like they're cooking. Nothing is sticking. If this is the first time that you've not used oil, I really want to encourage you to try to do it this method, because it's a lot healthier for you. And you'll see that your onions, if you keep enough broth or water in the pan, you never want them to be swimming in water, but you just want a little bit of moisture in there. You will see that those will not stick. Now, if you walk away from the pan and 5 minutes later, you're not paying attention, yes, it will be sticking. So you do have to do what I call you have to watch things, you have to listen, and you slowly add just a little more broth or a little more water just for them to cook, okay? So we're gonna get we have 1 cup of diced carrots, okay? That's probably like it was almost 5 little carrots for me, because my carrots were little tiny carrots. So it depends on the size of your carrots. So you need 1 cup of carrot. I have a half a cup of diced celery. And I was near the end of my own celery today, and I kept a little bit of it out for you, because I like reminding you that all of this innards is really tender and very, very delicious. And I never throw this these leaves out. They're very delicious. In fact, I chop them up actually. And I always call the inner part of the celery the sexy part of the celery because it's the most tender part. And I left this piece out just to show you that when you small dice, you want to just, make some sticks, right? As if you were having carrot sticks or celery sticks, and then you want to just make them so that they're skinny, about 1/4 inch is what I recommend. And then you want to just small dice, okay? That's how you get your small dice. You want everything in this meal pretty much to be uniform. The carrots and the peas and I've cut the mushrooms, you'll see, I'll show you those too. And maybe we'll use these leaves. So all of this cooks, the garlic, the celery. I'm just gonna make sure that that is cooking away. And it's looking already delicious. It could be soup already, but it's not. It's gonna be our pot pie filling. And what else do I have here? I have 2 cups of mushrooms. You can use any kind of mushroom you want, actually, but these are the cremini, the brown ones. And I want to show you that I actually cleaned them off. You never want to wash them under rushing water. You want to get a paper towel and just wipe off the top of the mushroom, the dirt. And I've cut the stem off. I'm not looking for, you could use the stem. I actually use the stem to feed my little puppy. She gets mushrooms and I give her the stem. So I'm all the time cutting the mushrooms now. And then what I did was I cut the mushroom in half, okay, just so that they're halves. And then I just made kind of chunks out of them. So I didn't make slices. I want it to be chunky mushrooms, okay, like that. I'm just showing you what they look like. And you want 2 cups of those chunky mushrooms. So this all cooks pretty fast. Now, we're going to add some white beans to this to these vegetables that will give you added fiber as well as protein. And you know that I'm a Rancho Gordo club member. That's a bean, part of a bean club in Santa Rosa, California, and I get beans, and I'm all the time cooking beans, all the time talking about beans, and these that I'm using today, I cooked the other day, and these are cannellini beans. They're the white beans. Now, when I made this dish earlier in the week, I actually used a can of butter beans, okay? Butter beans are also really nice to use. And so I wrote that in the recipe, butter beans, but use a Great Northern bean, use a cannelli bean. I think a white bean is what you're looking for. And if you're buying the beans in the can, you're looking for no salt added, okay? So that's important because if you're one of those people that are still eating salt regularly, but you're trying to cut back, you want to leave, if you have to salt things, you leave that till the end when you have to sprinkle a little salt, but try not to bring home your beans or your tomato sauce or your vegetable broth loaded with lots of sodium, right? People don't realize how much sodium is in the products that we bring home from the grocery store. That's why I like making my own beans, my own broth, because I know what I have. Okay, so this is sizzling, and I'm listening to it while I'm talking. I'm going to put all the mushrooms in, okay, right now, and those mushrooms are going to cook, and they're going to release some of their own natural juices, okay? And at the same time, I'm going to put the peas in a very few minutes and the corn, okay? So you can see that we have quickly moved and gotten all our vegetables in. And I can show you what this is looking like if you'd like just to see. It's looking very delicious, full of mushrooms, corn, celery. And this has to cook. And maybe what's best for us to do is to put a lid. I forget about using lids sometimes. I put them off to the side. But when you're trying to cook anything quickly, which is what we're trying to do here today, because we have things to get done in an hour's time, I'm going to put the lid on the pot. The other thing that I want to tell you is I had some green beans left over from another meal that I made at the beginning of the week. And of course I could eat these on top of any kind of green salad or eat them at any point just as a snack. But I thought, you know what? Why not go ahead and put them in here? We're going to have regular beans, and then we're going to have green beans. Not so many green beans. And the other thing that I had was I had 2 small potatoes that were starting to spud. So again, I said you can add that. You don't have to. But I'm going to go ahead and put the potatoes in now because it's the potatoes and the mushrooms that need to cook, okay? Now, I do want to tell you that the more vegetables you add, if you're kind of just doing this intuitively, which is how I usually do things, you are going to have to make a little more gravy, a little more sauce than maybe I've written down for you in your recipe. The recipe is based on the amount of vegetables that I set out to make when I wrote the recipe. But I've already now added some potatoes, and we're getting ready to add probably almost a cup of green beans. That too is going to have to cook, so we're going to get those in there, and we have to get the these out of their water. And if you use, I say recommend use 1 can of beans. 1 can is approximately a cup and a half. So somewhere in this kitchen, I have a spoon. I'm not sure where, because I have things everywhere. And I actually, it's closer to me than I realized. And I actually have a slotted spoon. That's what I was looking for. So that when I take them out of their little quart-sized container, I always have beans like this in my refrigerator. Why? Because sometimes I eat them as a snack. Sometimes I put them on a green salad. Sometimes I put them in everything. I'm like a bean person. I either say are you a bean person when I'm interviewing you? Are you a bean person or are you a green person? Wendy, you're a green person, right?
I am. I remember when we cooked together, I was the salad and you were the soup. So I miss those days because
I know, because you would remind me to eat my greens, which sometimes I would forget. It's not that I would forget them on purpose. It's just that I lean towards beans, right? That's the way I lean, and you lean towards greens. So we were a good combo together because I always thought, if I go to Wendy's, I'm going to get my greens,
Absolutely.
And if I go to Wendy's, I'm going to remind her to eat her beans. So.
I like the jars that got passed back and forth.
Yes. We should talk about that, right, Wendy? When we had a jar. It was a very funny thing because Wendy lived 10 blocks away from me in New York, and whenever I made anything in the kitchen, I had a ball jar, not a quart-sized jar, but a smaller one, like a pint jar. It was 2 cups. And whenever I made soup or whenever I made beans, it was called the Wendy jar. And so whenever I made things, it would go into the Wendy jar. It had her name on it. And that name never went away because it was on tape. And it was the Wendy jar. And I would deliver it full to her. And then she would deliver it empty back to me. And this jar went back and forth between our houses. You made out. I didn't have to eat everything I cooked by myself. So
Correct.
that was good because I cooked too much and it was a good way of sharing.
Exactly.
So
I
miss those days, Wendy, of a Wendy jar.
I miss your bean soups.
Yes, my bean soups. So anyway, we've got this cooking. I'm going to go ahead and add the corn. I'm just going to get everything in there right this minute. Corn, peas, and then we're going to make the sauce actually. And the sauce is pretty important. So this is everything's cooking. I've added no broth yet, okay? We just have vegetables cooking. And the potatoes are already starting to cook, I can see. And it reminds me a little bit of this, it's funny when you see corn and peas and green beans and carrots, it flashes back to when I was a kid and my mother would buy frozen vegetables, which at the time I didn't realize they were pretty good for you, actually, better than the can. And she would buy vegetable medley. And suddenly I looked in the pot, Wendy, and I thought, oh my God, that is vegetable medley. So we're going to make our sauce, and in order to make our sauce, I have to just clean up. Now we need to get flavor into this, right? We haven't put any, we're not going to use any salt. I'm just going to small dice this, get this out of the way right while I'm talking to you. And we do need to add some black pepper. That is for certain. Now, the spices that I'm going to use are fresh herbs today. That is really what's going to make things taste phenomenally delicious. And I like using a little bit of sage, which looks like this. These are like leaves, and they're very furry and feel like velvet. And you see fresh sage all year round, but it's very common between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then I'm using some fresh thyme, and then I'm using some fresh rosemary. This is a lot of rosemary because I always have rosemary in the house, always. But what I wanted to tell you, and I mentioned this in the recipe, is that in the winter months when I'm not growing my own vegetables, I buy these little packages of herbs. That way I don't buy too much of an herb and it doesn't spoil. And there's something called poultry blend. Now, maybe if you in your past were eating turkey like me in my past a long time ago, there's actually a poultry blend spice, which you could use here. Actually, it's because it's quite good. It's got marjoram, it's got thyme, it's got sage, but we're using some of the fresh ones. But the packaging that they have after Thanksgiving and probably till the end of the year, very common in the stores, is called poultry blend. And what does that mean? It means that in the one package comes rosemary, sage, and thyme. So I really like buying that because then you don't have to buy a bunch of individual packages. Okay, so I'm going to take this rosemary off while we're talking. This is cooking like crazy, but we need to get our spices in there. And I'm going to take the thyme off of the branches here. Oh my gosh, and the minute you smell this fresh herbs, for me, it's just, I don't know, it's the most, I love the smell of so much of these herbs. And if it weren't, below freezing outside my door and in my ground, I would be grabbing these from the outside because it's definitely things that I grow in the summertime and don't need to buy them at the store. So I'm using a lot of fresh herbs here, and I'm just getting them off their branches. And we are going to use maybe 2 big leaves of thyme, maybe 3 of sage. And we're just going to chop this all up, okay? We're going to get a big heaping tablespoon at least, okay? And I'm just going to chop it up, and it's going to go in there. And this is what's in some black pepper, and that is one of the things that we're going to have many different layers of flavor, okay? Now, I know nothing's sticking in there. I'm not even worried that there's no moisture, that I haven't added the broth yet or the sauce, because we're going to make that on the side. Okay, but we're going to definitely get all these herbs into the pan. And we have to give it a good twisting of black pepper when we've got the pan open. Okay, so this is, and there's a little bit of celery there. There's a little bit of green leaves from the celery, but this is it. Okay, big heaping tablespoon of fresh herbs. Maybe even more than a tablespoon, maybe a tablespoon and a half. That's up to you how much herbs you put in. Okay, so this is going to go in right now. Okay, I'm just going to get that all in. And then we're going to work on making our sauce. And this is cooking away. I can see the potatoes are almost cooked. And how do I know that? Because they are becoming almost see-through, like when they get. And the mushrooms have shrunk down. And it looks super yummy. Now, this is a lot of vegetables, I want to tell you. It's a lot of vegetables. And I think what I'm going to do, just knowing how many vegetables are there, I'm going to pull out some because I wasn't planning on making this much filling. And again, this is a good meal to freeze But this is something that I could eat during the week separately with maybe not the sauce on it. I could eat that over some vegetables or something with over green salad. So I'm just pulling a little bit out because I've gotten so zealous here on making so much vegetables. Again, I added green beans and potatoes, something that wasn't in the original recipe. Now we're gonna make the sauce. And let me get a thing to put it in. I'm gonna get this, and we need a whisk. And we have our handy dandy ladle. So we need to, what do we need? We need flour. I'm using whole wheat flour today. Many of you might use all-purpose flour. That's what I used in the past. But white flour has no nutrients in it. So if you can use the whole wheat flour, it's good. If for some reason you're gluten-free, and I would use your gluten-free flour, or you could use some kind of arrowroot or cornstarch, but you're gonna wanna thicken your sauce. Okay, so today we're thickening it, and I have 2 tablespoons, just 2 tablespoons. You don't need a lot of whole wheat flour. And then I better look at my recipe because I tend to just remember things without looking. We need to have 2 tablespoons. I'm gonna get the tablespoon, and I'm using tomato paste here, okay? So the tomato paste actually gives it a good extra tomatoey dimension, rather than just having a broth that is full of mushrooms or it just gives it a really nice flavoring. And then I said I needed 2 tablespoons, but I actually need a teaspoon as well. So I'm just going to be liberal with this teaspoon and just put it there, because you can't have, I like the tomatoey flavor. I think it's really, really nice. Okay, then I'm going to actually add a teaspoon of miso. And the miso that I like to use the most, we've talked about this before, is a brand called South River. And it's a chickpea miso. And I don't use too much of it, but I'm just going to use a teaspoon of it. And that's going to go in here. And I find that gives it its own natural sauce, its own natural sodium. And that really, and miso also helps, just like the tomato sauce, to give it a little bit of dimension. Now we need our liquid. And I have our broth here. And I'm going to do 1 cup to start with, okay? 1. Now, these are quarter cups, okay? This is a quarter cup measure. So I'm going to do that 4 times. But we're going to need more broth than that because we have a lot of vegetables. And the other thing that we need in this particular sauce, and I'm going to get my whisk because it's so much better. So you don't want any bumps in your sauce here. You want to dissolve the liquid right away, the flour. You want it to all, now when this hits the hot pan, it's immediately going to get thick. And if it doesn't get thick for some reason, then you can add a little more whole wheat flour. But I try to be very careful and not add too much because you don't want your gravy, your sauce, tasting really floury. And then I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of sherry cooking wine. Now, I've used this before in the demo, and it's come up that some people don't like to use anything that has any kind of alcohol level. I think all the alcohol has been, I'm just looking on the label, it's pretty much cooked off, but if you wanted to shy away from sherry vinegar, I think it's a lovely vinegar to cook with. But if you want to shy away from it, then I would use red wine vinegar in place of that sherry vinegar. So hopefully that answers the question, hey, I don't have sherry vinegar, what would I use instead? You could use apple cider vinegar. I would probably stay away from the white wine vinegar because it's very sharp and tangy, but you are looking for something that has a tang. Now we are going to need more vegetable broth for all these vegetables, but I just like getting that smooth. The other thing that I took out of my cabinet, which I haven't used forever, and I didn't list it in the recipe, but I just want to tell you, is something fun to have on hand. It's called porcini powder. And I realized when I was prepping this afternoon, I thought, oh, where's that porcini powder? It's in a tiny little jar in my cabinet, and it often gets pushed to the back. But what is it? It's dry porcini mushrooms that I, a long time ago, just ground up in a spice mill and made a powder. And if you're to open and smell it, it actually smells really good. So I'm going to sprinkle just a little bit on there. Again, not in the recipe, but it's not essential. But I remembered I had it, so I want to get it in there. So I'm going to now pour this sauce on top. And then we want to get at least another cup, if not more. So I'm going to measure this. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. And I see this boiling already. But let's get this second cup of broth in. Okay. And we're just going to, I have this wonderful spoon. This is actually a rice spoon, believe it or not. And I tend to grab it more often because I love it so, that spoon. But it's specifically for, I don't know, it's like a rice spoon. Anyway, this is cooking away. It's starting to already thicken. I can see that. I'm going to add a little more broth, just a half a cup more, because I do want it to be somewhat liquid. I don't want it to be watery like soup, but I want it to be a little bit runny. So I'm going to move that over here. And I think we've got everything in the pan. This is cooking away. We just need to get our carrots, everything needs to be cooked. My puppy is at my feet, waiting for me to drop things. I just want you to know. But this is what this is looking like, okay? And if we let it cook for just a very few minutes, it's going to come to a boil. Again, my goal is I don't want it to be thick. I want it to be a little bit, I want it to be perfect. I don't want it to be runny, but I don't want it to be thick. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move all of this, because you'll know that when we have to do a dough, we want it to be really clean surface. So we're just going to
before you move on, a couple questions that came up, and also the pot just looks delicious. I love the colors and textures in there. But a couple of questions. Is this a good time?
Yes, it's perfect time. I was going to say, let's have questions, so you beat me to it, so it's no problem. I'm just going to clean the counter while we're getting ready for the dough, but it's the perfect time to ask questions.
Go for it. This was a really interesting one. Is there a substitute for the tomato paste, or would you just leave it out? Or
I think you could just leave it out. I think you could just leave it out. I mean, these questions that come to you, Wendy, I sometimes want to know where the source of it is from. Like, is somebody allergic to tomatoes and they can't eat tomatoes? They don't like tomatoes.
I don't like tomatoes.
So it helps me answer it better sometimes.
It makes them ill. They don't like tomatoes.
Yeah, so I definitely, when I used to make this sauce in the old days, literally, and I'm talking about the old days, 20 years ago for my husband, and we never used tomatoes, and we made a white sauce. This is going to be a tomatoey sauce because I like the flavor of tomatoes, but you could absolutely have a white sauce. So you would just have a flour and broth, and maybe what else and some miso would help the flavor, but you could absolutely, I think you'd be fine to leave this, and maybe you would want to put a little plant-based milk, maybe just to give it a little bit of flavor and a little bit of, it would help with the sauce, I think, to add a little bit of milk if you're not going to use so you don't just have broth and miso and vinegar. I think I would add a little bit of plant-based milk, any kind.
And would you ever change the flavor to make it like a curry or a Thai curry or some other Asian?
Well, that's a really good question, Wendy, because exactly 1 year ago, last year's demo, December 13th, we made Indian curry shepherd's pie. Okay, so if anybody wants to go look up that dish, it was phenomenal. And I think about this dish being similar when you're just basically, last year was shepherd's pie with vegetables and lentils and curry, and then under all of those vegetables were under a mountain of mashed potatoes, right? So this too could have mashed potatoes on top instead of a pie crust. So it's a great question. And I encourage you to look at that video from last year, because that is one of my favorite things, that curry shepherd's pie with lentils and vegetables. So of course you could definitely not use the thyme and the rosemary and just go the curry route. Cool. With ginger, right? Ginger and some curry and fresh ginger for sure. And maybe a little bit of jalapenos, right? Yeah. I mean, and now we have another class to do. Now we have another demo. I wish we had 2 hours. I would make that too.
I know. It's amazing with the plant-based cooking that you can, vegetables are vegetables, even though individually they taste so different. But you can
yes, and there's so much versatility, right? There's so much. This is why I'm saving this. This could be a cold salad of some sort, right? Yeah. It doesn't have to be. The vegetables are all cooked, right? So this could be delicious, just, I don't know, vinaigrette dressing over it, and it's going to be salad at some point, because I just don't need that much filling.
Quick, 2 other questions. Can you freeze tomato paste? I know you can.
Oh my God, I do it all the time, and I used to do it all the time. When I would buy it in a can, I would need 1 tablespoon, and then I would put the can in the refrigerator, and then, 2 weeks later, I'd find the can, and it would be moldy. So if I use the can, I actually open it, I take I make little pieces of foil, little tiny pieces of foil, and I put 1 tablespoon on every square piece of foil. And then I just make a little tin package, like a little folded gift. And then I put all those little gifts into a Ziploc bag, and then I put it into the freezer. And then it's in your freezer, frozen, and then you need it, you know that you have a tablespoon portioned out. Now, you could take it 1 step further and put a piece of saran wrap in an ice cube tray, and put the tomato paste in an ice cube tray, and then wrap those. But these days, I buy this tomato paste in a jar, which you're familiar with. I know you buy it, Wendy. I love it so much. It's this bio nature, organic, no salt added tomato paste. It comes in a glass jar. And for some reason, maybe because it's so delicious, it's literally ingredients, organic tomatoes. That's what it says. I love it so much that it doesn't spoil for me. It doesn't spoil like the way it used to spoil for me. And I'm not sure why.
Using the glass.
Maybe because I use it more than I ever did in the past. But I used to always, freezing tomato paste is a great idea.
Great. There's another question about freezing garlic. Can you cut up garlic and freeze it?
Well, I'll tell you what I did today, just so you know that I'm lazy a lot of times. You all think that I labor in the kitchen, but there are many days I have no creativity and I'm totally lazy. So this morning I made hummus, because I like hummus, and I made beet hummus for my sandwiches during the week. And I thought, while I'm putting the garlic into the Cuisinart for the hummus, I'm going to put in almost a whole head of garlic. So I took all the garlic out of its little shells, and I put a whole head of garlic, and I blended it in the Cuisinart, and I got a ton of garlic. And that 2 tablespoons that you just saw me having was from this morning's garlic that I cut up from the from the hummus. So you can freeze it. You can definitely freeze it, no problem.
Great. I was just going to mention that the glass also gives you a layer of protection from, even though many cans say BPA free, there's some controversy whether or not it actually is. So anyway, anything you can get in a glass, particularly tomatoes, is better.
So this is already yummy. I'm going to put a little bit of black pepper in it, okay? Just a little bit. And you're gonna have to taste it according to your, of course, when I'm turning this, I see that I'm almost out of black pepper. I heard it in there, but there's not a lot. So I'm gonna get I have a little bit already ground. So I'm gonna put a little bit of that in here. Okay, and take that over there. And so black pepper has to go in. And it should be tasting pretty good right now. And it's not runny. I want to just show you the consistency. I'm going to get a big spoon and I'm just going to show you that it's kind of like this. Okay, it's soupy but not soupy. I'm going to show you I'm going to get you right in front of the camera so you really see what this looks like. I'm taking it off the burner for a minute. So it's thickened, right, everyone? It's thickened, but it's not cement, okay? You want it to be in its own gravy, yet you don't want it to be soup, okay? If for some reason you find that you've added too much liquid, then just make a little more roux on the side. And the roux on the side means that you're just taking a little bit of flour and a little bit of broth. And usually a roux consists of some kind of fat, which is butter, and then equal amounts of butter to flour, and then you add the broth. But today we're not using any fat, and we're just using the whole wheat flour and the broth. If for some reason you feel like you've gotten overzealous and you put too much broth in, then just take a little more flour, right? Just a little more flour and do it on the side. You never want to just put your flour and then your broth in here. You want to always mix it like we did in a small container, and you want to make sure that it's smooth. Just like when we're making a cornstarch or an arrowroot slurry, we call it a slurry. You want to, just a second, oh my goodness. Something, maybe that pepper got up my nose. Oh. So, this is boiling away. I don't want it to be too hot. I'm going to lower this. I'm just going to put it on a slow heat. And it's cooking. Again, we don't want to overcook it. And I want to taste it one more time to make sure. But Wendy, were we done with the questions?
There's a question of whether you can use chickpea flour to make the roux.
I've never done it, but I don't see why not. You could try. It would probably be just fine, actually. I think it would be good in this, actually.
I do too, and maybe even almond flour. Sometimes I'll use...
Oh, you're going to see we're using a little almond flour. Now, this is delicious. I just want to tell you that it's delicious. I actually think it could use a little teeny bit. When you want a little teeny bit more of anything, like vinegar, what I do is I take my 2 fingers and I put them over here, and I just do a splash between my fingers. And I just want a teeny bit more because I tasted a little bit of that vinegar in the back of my mouth when I had that seasoning, and when I tasted it, but I thought if I could just have just a little more of that, I think it will be delicious. So I have this on very low. It's just simmering, and we need to move on to the next thing. We need to get these in the oven. But was that everything, Wendy? Because I've kind of cleaned up here. And we're going to move on to, because we've got to get it into the little containers.
A few people just said bless you when you sneezed.
Oh, okay, so we're okay to move forward. Because yes, I do want to get to the biscuits.
We're good to go. You're being blessed.
Okay, I'm being blessed. Okay, so we have a clean counter here. We have a dog that is standing on its heels, basically on his back legs, trying to smell everything that I'm cooking, and I'm ignoring her. So that is a good place to be. So we're going to get out our next things. So let's get these things. We have all these things. Now I have red pepper out. That's important. And we have some herbs still. And I realized that we should cut a little bit of the herbs. Before we quite make a mess with the dough, I want to cut some rosemary. Okay, rosemary is what I'm cutting now. And we just want to cut it. We're going to cut a little bit of it also for the biscuits later. And if you didn't have the fresh herbs, of course I encourage you, just like Wendy encouraged you at the beginning of the show, to buy organic vegetables, even regenerative vegetables if you can. But of course, if you're not able to afford things that are the organic vegetables, then it's better to just eat the conventional vegetables. Better to not. I don't want you to say I can't afford them, therefore I'm not going to eat them. You can definitely, and eating beans is, and rice and grains is not an expensive endeavor. That is for sure. So I'm going to put a little bit of this, just a little bit, inside our dough, just for flavoring. We're going to keep this kind of close by, and I think I've made myself enough room here. So in this bowl, I have 1 cup of whole wheat flour. I have 1/4 cup of almond flour, and I put a little bit of rosemary in there, and then we're going to get our measuring, and we're not going to have any fat. Usually when I make a pie dough, we have some kind of fat, but today we're not going to have any fat, and I'm using 1/3 cup of water, of cold water. I'm going to get a fork out, and we're just going to mix this up. And we're going to let it come together. And I find that I always like putting the 1/3 cup, and I tell you that you're probably going to need more. So let's just get a little more water. And we're just going to put a little more. It's best to always add it a little bit at a time. Okay? And you want this to really, and you'll see when we make the biscuits, we're going to use a little bit of fat in our biscuit. And we're actually going to use a potato, believe it or not. So I probably now put almost a 1/2 cup of water, just in total. And I'm going to, this is sticky. It doesn't look sticky at the moment, so you see. And the only way to get in there is you pull up your sleeves, you make sure your hands are clean, and then you get in there with your hands. And that's the only way to deal with dough, is to really feel it. I'm kind of mixing it up. And I'm going to actually add, I could actually add a tiny bit more water. Just a little bit more. You don't want too much, but you do want the dough to come together. Okay? And this is coming together just perfectly with no fat in it. But it does have a little bit of fat in it in general because we put in 1/4 cup of almond flour. Now, I have in my cabinet sorghum flour. Sorghum is good if you're gluten-free. If some people that are gluten-free can tolerate gluten-free oats, you could use oat flour if you can tolerate that in your gluten-free diet. And this is your dough. You see it's nice and malleable, okay? And what we're going to do is I'm going to get the dough cutter and realize I can't do anything without the dough cutter. And of course I see that the counter is wet and we can't have that. And I'm going to turn this off. I don't want it cooking anymore. We're just going to put that towel there. And we're going to, this is probably enough dough for probably four pies, depending, just depending. So we're not going to make 4 pies. I'm going to make probably 2 pies. So what we want to do is get the roller, the rolling pin out. We want to get a little bit of, I put in a bowl, a little bit of flour for the counter, right? And we want to get this kind of into a round, and we want to make sure that we, and I have not left myself enough space. Let me just move this here for now. And we want to roll this dough, okay? And how big do we want to roll it? Well, it really depends on what size container you're using to put your pie in. Now, if you're going to make one big pie, like an 8 or 9 inch pie, you would have to not divide it into little balls like I've just divided. You're going to actually roll the whole thing out, okay? But I have different size containers, and I'm going to show them to you right this minute. Okay? I have these individual, I like serving pies individually. You can serve it big if you want, but I am all about serving portions by themselves. It's a nice presentation. So I have 2 small little ceramic pie tins. You can buy the little foil tins if that's something that you like and you want to freeze the filling. You could buy the foil tins, and then when the filling is cool, you would just wrap it with saran wrap and then put it in the freezer. And then when you're ready to cook them, then they just go into the oven to cook. And then you could have a nice big ramekin. This is a big size ramekin. And then I actually have a smaller ramekin, right? So depending on what size this is, would be dinner size. And this would be almost like if you wanted just a small amount and then serve it with a big salad. Okay, so we're going to make the big one for sure. And the circumference about this is pretty much the same. So you see I've rolled it out so that it covers the pie. Now, you could trim it if you want, and I'll show you both ways. So I've rolled it out so that it's pretty thin, okay? And we're just going to leave that like that. We're going to leave that one for that one. And then we're going to just make one more because I do want to get to the biscuits. It's really, and we only have so much time for things. And we're going to roll this one out. And this one we're actually going to cut, okay? We're going to cut it, and I'm just putting a little more flour here. And we're just going to make it so that it's round. More round than it is. You can see that it's not so round at the moment. And sometimes I like putting I took chili flakes out. There's no salt in this dough, and I like the way the chili flakes look on the top, and I like the way that it gives it a little kick, which is what salt would do for dough as well. So if you want it to be exact, you would just turn it over, right? And then you would use a little knife. I'm just going to get a small knife here because I'm directly on my counter, and you would literally just trim it to equal the exact circle that you need. And this extra dough is pretty much not good for anything. You could re-roll it, but it's never going to be tender like you want it. And this would go exactly on top, okay? So we have one that kind of hangs over, which is the look I prefer. And we're just going to get this, and we're going to get our spoon. Where's my good little red spoon? And we're going to cover this. So we're going to use the big one, and this is off, and I'm going to just fill this up. Now this is going to be a very hearty meal. This is going to be 2 to 3 tablespoons. Okay, this I'm filling up to the rim. This is a big one. Okay, I prefer, I think, the little pies, but you could use either one. Just depends. And like I said, so normally you would want this just to cool off, okay? It would be nice for it to cool off, but we don't have time for cooling off. Now, remember I just told you that I like a little bit of flakes on the top because there's no salt in the dough. So I just actually sprinkle a little bit of flakes just on the top, and it looks nice because it's red and it's pretty, right? And I'm just going to literally take this dough, and this was the bigger one, and it's going to go on top of my right here like this. And then what I'm going to do is get a fork, and I'm just going to put a fork around the whole edge to seal in the air into the pot, into the pot pie, right? Because we want this to be sealed on the edge. And I'm going to let this just hang over. We're going to get a little bit of plant-based milk. You could also do this with some aquafaba, the bean juice. You could do it with that. I prefer the milk. And we're just going to brush the top of this so that it becomes nicer and prettier and golden brown, right? So that's one thing. The other thing that you can do if you have time, and I don't know where I went with it, if you are so inclined and you haven't exhausted yourself by this time, you could take these little scraps, right? Remember I showed you that there were little teeny scraps. If you want, you could roll them so that they're a little thinner, and you could get a little cutters, I have here. This is getting fancy, but you could actually cut out a nice leaf shape, and then you would score the leaf with your knife. You would make little veins in it, just like that, and just like that. I'm making little veins, and then that could actually be on the top as a decoration, okay? It's actually nice to have more than just one leaf. This little set of leaves that I have are several kinds of leaves. You could do as many leaves as you want. This, again, takes a little extra time, but it makes it a little more festive, and we are at the end of the year, and you do want to make your little veins with your knife like that. I know that you can't exactly see, but I'll put it in my hand for you, and so you can see the leaf, and then that's going to go right on top, and I'm just going to make it so it's pretty, and then you want to paint those as well, okay? You want to get those painted, and all of that is painted and ready, and we want to get our sheet pan ready. I'm going to put this in the oven. We'll make one more.
Carole, can you hold it up to the camera before you take it back, just to see them?
Sure, of course.
They look really
It's
beautiful.
very hot, Wendy, because the bottom of the ceramic is hot. But you
Got
see,
it. Oh my God, it's beautiful.
and of course I left the edges to have more dough extra. You don't have to have it hanging. That's just one style of making a pie, okay? The other, I mean, there's so many styles of pie making. We'd be here for the next hour making pies. So now this pie, I'm just going to roll this out, right? Just a little teeny bit. I wanted to make sure that the chilies are stuck in there. I don't have very much extra dough to make it so pretty, but we'll see if we can get one leaf out of this extra dough right here. And we are, again, taking it one step further, something you don't have to do, right? I like showing you these things because this is how I would do it if I were not on camera, because I always want to make it festive and as pretty as possible. And you just make that little leaf, you see, and it's so pretty. And you could make leaves all around the edges. You could get creative, make polka dots, whatever you want, right?
You need to put a hole in it.
You do, actually. I'm going to show you in a minute. But see how this looks, Wendy? Ready to go. And it's going to go on top of this. And it has no edges, right? No extra dough. So I'm just going to kind of seal the edges here, right? So that it's, again, nothing's hanging over. If you really wanted to get fancy, you could try to, you know, poke it on the sides, right? And make a little pattern with your fingers. You could do that. But the goal is you want to have it sealed. You don't want any air getting in. And I was going to use the tin of the fork to seal it, but I've just decided at the last minute. Oh, and there's really no dough there to actually pinch anything, but there you go. And then what you want to do is you want to take the fork and you want to go quickly into it and stab it just one time. Okay, and I'm going to do that to the other one. And I'm going to stab it one time just to get some air. And we didn't put any milk on this second one, but these have to get into the oven so that in 10 or 15 minutes, when we're done with the show and you're making your announcements, we can actually see what these pies look like done. Okay, so the goal now is everything's inside is pretty much cooked. We just want to brown everything. So we're putting these in, and I'm putting them in a 400-degree oven. Okay, so that's going in. And we have 2 more pieces of dough left for later. And if I didn't want to make any more pot pies for today, I would just wrap these up in some plastic. And I would just put them, and it'd be just fine in the refrigerator. And I'm going to do that just for now so that they don't dry out. I'm just going to put them in a teeny little plastic bag, and they would just go in the fridge. Now, in record-breaking time, we're going to learn how to make biscuits. But I'll answer any questions that anybody has.
I think we're all with you. There haven't been any questions that you haven't answered. So we're good to
Okay,
go. And
so let's
biscuits
do
sound
the
great.
biscuits because I love these biscuits.
Yeah.
And Wendy, it's from one of our favorite chefs, you and I, someone that you introduced me to when I used to hang out at your house. We never met this person in person, but it's Vegan Risha, and
Yes,
she
I love
has many
her.
cookbooks. She even has a cookbook that's just for Instapots. But I don't have those cookbooks, but I go to her website all the time and I get her newsletters, so I stay pretty informed on her new things. She's not an SOS free chef, but I always take her recipes and I adapt them to make them fit whatever I need. Because she's really good, and she makes a lot of Indian food, which I love. So this is her biscuit recipe, and I'm just gonna go through it, and you'll be amazed at how good these biscuits are. Okay, so I don't know, Wendy, I didn't give you the link for Vegan Risha, but you know who she is, and if you have time, maybe you could put it in the chat for people.
I do.
So what I'm doing is I'm following her recipe, and I'm going to read it out loud to you. It's 1.5 cups of spelt flour. I might have changed that. I don't remember what her original kind of flour. She cooks with a lot of all-purpose flour. If you couldn't eat, you could substitute your gluten-free flour if you want. And then we're going to put in, I listed this on the recipe, but I don't use it. She puts in 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So if you're one of those people that are just clinging to salt, then I would put 1/4 teaspoon, okay? 1/4 teaspoon is just enough. You don't need the 1/2 teaspoon. I'm not putting anything in, okay? Then we're gonna add 2 teaspoons of baking powder and 1/4 teaspoon of soda, which I already have measured out right here, okay? And then we're going to put in some herbs. You can put in you don't have to put in any herbs at all, or you can put in herbs. It's up to you. If I were making these biscuits for jam or something, breakfast biscuits, I wouldn't put any herbs in it at all. Maybe rosemary would go nice with apricot jam, but in general, I wouldn't put, but because we're making these biscuits for this specific filling, I thought it'd be nice just to take some rosemary and just put some rosemary in, because we have it on the counter, and I'll just put in a little bit of rosemary. Okay, now here come the secret ingredients, which I love so much. She has, and I have to get them out of the refrigerator because it's very important when you make these biscuits that everything's cold. So let me get it out of the fridge. So we're using a plant-based milk, and we need to have 1/3 cup of any kind of plant-based milk. And then she sours that milk so it becomes buttermilk. So you can do that with lemon juice or lime juice. In her original recipe, she puts 2 teaspoons of lime juice. Today, I put lime juice. And it's already curdling. I did that hours ago, but I have the milk with the lime juice, and that is serving as our buttermilk. Now, we need to have some fat into this, and we're going to use some coconut cream. And you've seen me use coconut cream many times on this particular demo, and I love these little cans, because often when you make an entree, they say use a whole can, and it's way too much fat. You can eat a little bit of fat, but you don't want to consume fat. So this is I put this in the refrigerator several days ago. In fact, I almost always have a can in the refrigerator for this very purpose. And what happens is the liquid is at the bottom here, and the fat is at the top, okay? And we need to have 1/3 cup of the fat, okay? And we're gonna have that plenty of fat from this one little can is gonna come 1/3 cup. Okay, and it's really cold, really hard, and soon I'm gonna dig. Okay, this is the last. There's 2 more big spoonfuls like this of fat in there, and you can see that I'm already at my 1/3 cup. It's already full. what I'll do with the rest of this juice, or I'll either save that for some kind of curry stew or save it for a smoothie, but it will go into the refrigerator. Okay, so immediately this 1/3 cup goes right into our flour. And then we need to have 1/4 cup of mashed potatoes. Okay, mashed potatoes. And the mashed potatoes can be a sweet potato or it can be a white potato. Either one works. I've done both. If you use the orange sweet potato, you're going to have a little bit of an orange tinged biscuit, which there's nothing wrong with that. I have a Hana, H-A-N-N-A, sweet potato here, and we just need to get our 1/4 cup. And we just need to, I peeled it. I cooked it yesterday. The potato's cold, okay? And I'm just gonna smash it into this cup, okay? And it's gonna go into here. And that all is gonna go right into here as well. Smashed sweet potato. And we're gonna get rid of this right this minute. Okay, and what we're gonna do is work this like normal dough, which means that you're just going to break up. Now, if you have a pastry cutter, you could blend this is no different than if you had butter. You're just basically taking the sweet potato and breaking it down, and then you're breaking down those big coconut, cold coconut fat. And you're getting that all mixed in, looking like they're little peas, okay? Now, remember, we put a little bit of rosemary in. You don't have to. You could put, if you wanted dried, you could put Italian seasoning in if you didn't. Yes.
Quick question. If someone cannot eat coconut, is there a different kind of fat that they could use with cashew butter or something like that?
You could try to use cashew butter. It's going to taste cashewy, you know. These biscuits are really light and fluffy. So, you know, other fats you could experiment with. I would try avocado. I would try. You know, I can't promise you the results because I don't know. But I think that it would work. Or maybe you could add applesauce is another good replacement for fat. So maybe you could try a 1/3 cup of unsweetened applesauce. These are just my thoughts out loud, Wendy, because until, you know, we done some baking here, right? You know, it's who I am, is my love, is baking. But the fact is that we can't eat so much of it all the time because it is full of fat, right? So I consider these kinds of things as a treat and not an all the time, everyday kind of thing. So that is our milk going in. And I hope that answered the question, Wendy, from whomever asked it. I hope.
Yes, I think so.
I think it's, you know, as I say with baking all the time, you know, I'm a scientist. And once you start experimenting, you are in the lab. You are in the test kitchen. So I test things all the time. And sometimes fail, and sometimes do it over and over again till I figure it out, right? So that person needs to be a person that's not afraid of failing, okay? And what they might discover something really fantastic. Avocado or applesauce could be delicious in the biscuit.
So too. And she thinks so too. Thank you.
Yeah, so, you know, but like I said, because I haven't done it myself, I can't tell you that it works, you know? So I try to only show you things that, you know, I try not to fail while I'm in the demo. I fail off screen all the time, but you know, it's okay to fail. You have to be willing to fail. You just have to be willing to fail, and it's okay. So you try it another time and you make an adjustment. It's the only way that you learn. Okay, so here's our dough. Doesn't make a lot. Okay, doesn't make a lot at all. And if you were just making biscuits, just for making biscuits, like you are a person that want to serve biscuits with your tofu scramble, or you would want this dough to be very thick and you would cut your circles out. But I don't want, because I'm making this dough mainly for the sauce, right? The beans and the vegetables for the pot pie. I'm going to have it kind of thinner than you normally would for biscuits, okay? So I rolled it about a ½ inch thick. And don't forget, we've got the rosemary in there, so it's going to be delicious. And if you want, I'm just getting my hands all, we're almost coming to the end, Wendy, but I think we have enough time to...
We definitely have enough time. Would you, I mean, of course, biscuits can be used instead of bread, but would you ever make this where it's kind of like a pizza dough or more bready?
No, you know, as I said at the beginning of the show, these pot pies are my own adult memory. And my husband loved the pot pies so much, but he didn't always want it with the puff pastry. He didn't always want it with the pie dough. Of course, you could, you know, something I didn't show you was you could put the pie dough at the bottom, then you could put the filling, then you could make a real top. But I think it's too much dough. You want to taste the filling and have a little bit of bread, you know, crust or crusty on the side, but you don't want it to be overwhelming, right? So the other way that he loved when we didn't have the pie dough or the, you know, I was telling him, go make your own toast and just put the filling over toast, is he loved biscuits. And so I used to just make a bunch of biscuits and then we would cut them open, put them on the plate, and then put the filling just on top. Okay, so you could, what else could, and like I said earlier in the show, you could just, if you want, you could make mashed potatoes on top. So this is a very thin biscuit. Can you see that it's like a ½ inch? And what I'm going to quickly do, and I don't know that this will really be ready before you all have to leave the show, but basically I'm just showing you. What you would do is you would put the filling into the pot pie, like, you know, here's your pot pie, and then your biscuit is just going to go on top. And we're just going to, let's get this in the oven, and maybe it will be ready right before. Oh, and we have to put a little painted milk on top because the painted milk makes it a little brown. Okay, so that's just going to go in and just cook on its own, just like that. That's all cooking. And then with this leftover dough, this was a big circle. I have smaller circles, and I like making just little biscuits. Like sometimes in the morning for me, just a little biscuit is very satisfying. It reminds me of the way that I used to eat when I used to eat buttermilk biscuits. And it's nice to be able to make biscuits. It's just something that's good to know how to do. It's a comfort food, right? And in the middle of winter when the days are, I don't know, it gets dark so early, and I find that you just want comfort food. Now, these are not going to puff up terribly big. If you roll them so they're thicker, they will puff up so they're nice and tall. This leftover dough can be rolled out probably one more time, but it can't take re-rolling, because if you're re-rolling, you are ending up with tough, you're making the gluten in the flour toughen, and I'm going to make one big biscuit so that and then this would go on a smaller sheet pan in the same 400-degree oven. So these again are going to be thinner biscuits. They will puff up. They have baking soda, baking powder in it, right? And then you can brush it with the plant-based milk if you want. You can brush it with the aquafaba. That's another kind of way of making things glistening and shining. And these will go in the oven just like this. And you've got biscuits made from sweet potatoes and coconut cream and whole wheat and spelt flour.
It
So
looks
I'm going to put this
delicious.
in. Everything is cooking perfectly. And I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup, Wendy, but I know you have a long list of announcements, and while everything's finishing cooking, maybe you could come back to me, and
I will come back to you, and
I'll try not to make very much noise, because I'm going to try to just do a little cleanup here so that there's a counter that you can see the finished food.
Gorgeous.
And did anyone have questions about biscuits?
No, none here yet. Let me just go through the chat. I don't think so. I think we're all good to go. And in the chat, kindly recommended apple butter instead of applesauce, just because of the liquid consistency of the sauce. And I think a couple of us thought that's such a great idea.
Nice idea if you have it without the sugar in it, right?
Yes,
Apple butter.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the thing. There's so many good things out there. You just have to find, like I love pomegranate syrup, but you have to find the pomegranate syrup that's just pomegranates, and not the pomegranates with all the sugar, right? So apple butter is a good idea. Whoever thought of that.
Yep.
Kudos to them. But you have to find the kind that's natural, right?
Right. Okay, I'm going to jump to the announcements. So those of you who joined us late, or just anyway at the end, we're reaching the end. Couple of things on behalf of Plant Powered Metro New York. Tomorrow night, please join us. If you're interested, we have our monthly book club. And the author tomorrow night is Dr. Shilpa Ravella, and her book is called A Silent Fire: The Story of Inflammation, Diet, and Disease. And this is both a presentation and Q&A with the author that's being co-sponsored by the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. Several of you who've been here for a while know that we often do co-presenting things with them. So this is one of those. Tomorrow from 7 to 8, and our beloved Lynn Diamond will be hosting the book club. And if you haven't read the book, it's not really a discussion so much of the book, although obviously that will come up. But if you have read the book, or even read a synopsis on it, you can probably participate and really get something out of it. And then next week still this week, sorry, on the 15th, we have our nutrition support circle. And then next Monday, the 19th, we have a potluck that's online, and it kind of turns into a lovely recipe swap, and really nice support, just meeting other people in the community who enjoy this lifestyle. So all of this is available on our website. Do sign up. The book club and the nutrition support circle and the Monday night swap is all online. And then please join us for the Jumpstart, or if you've got friends who might be interested in moving from a whole food plant-based, from the standard diet to whole food plant-based, join us for our Jumpstart. Our first orientation meeting is January 5th. So there's a ton of information online. You will find both a flyer and a brochure, and the brochure has a lot more detail about exactly what happens and the dates of when you meet with your group mentors, your mentor, and you'll be in a group with a mentor, or when you're doing the educational sessions. And it's a tremendous program, 21-day program, where you get enormous support for this lifestyle. So those are the big events in the immediate. Let me just check to see if there's anything else that needs to be said. I think that's it. You've gotten most of the links for the recipes in the chat. Our next demo with Carole will be January 2023, January 16th, 2023. For anything related to
15, Wendy.
Oh, 15. Sorry, 15, 2023. Sorry about that. And anything related to Plant Powered Metro New York, you can find us on our website. And Carole can be reached at carole@theveggievangard.com if you want to send her an email. Or she's also on Instagram posting pictures, and her hashtag is @theveggievangard. I will ask, just between now and the end of the year, let you know we have a match going on to double whatever donation you might want to give to Plant Powered Metro New York. I promise this won't be at every cooking demo, but between now and the end of the year, anything you give will be matched. All of our services are for free, as much as we can do them for free, or we've got cost. We can manage different levels of cost depending on your financial situation, for things like the Jumpstart or some of the bigger programs that cost us money. But we do try to provide as much as we can at every level of income, so that income doesn't become something that stops you from doing this lifestyle. So please do, those who can afford it, consider a donation this year to Plant Powered Metro New York. And I think, Carole, we are ready to go back to you.
Fantastic. You know, I think I have 5 more minutes, and I'm not going to keep people, but I'm going to show you what's in the oven, show you what's happening, and then quickly put it right back in the oven. Not something that I normally do, but, and you know what? It's so funny. You lose things in your kitchen all the time, Wendy. I just spent the last 5 minutes being in a circle. Where's the second pot holder? Like, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I know I own one. Where did it go? It's not anywhere to be found. And of course, it was sitting right here under the recipes. So
happens to me all the time.
Oh my gosh, sometimes I think I'm losing my mind. It's so super crazy. But everything needs like 5 more minutes. And I like I said, I don't want to keep people. One thing that I did while we were on break was, this is a leftover sauce that I have. And I have one more pie dish, and I have a little bit of, I can show you what that would look like over, like you could just take a biscuit, cut it in half, and then just get a nice bowl, put the biscuit down, and then put the sauce on top.
And speaking of your pie dish, someone just asked, how many ounces was the first larger ramekin that you used?
Oh, that's a really super amazing question. Because I have like 6 of these little ones, and these little ones are probably a cup, and I think the other ones are 2 cups, and the big one is 2 cups. I'm just going to tell you right this minute. So this one is 3/4 of a cup. This is what I call the little one, and probably measures almost 3 inches. Okay. To me, that would almost be enough for a side dish and what you would call with a salad. It'd be really pretty to serve a small pot pie with a salad, because I think this. You have a lot of vegetables in this meal, but it's nice to serve it with a green salad. The bigger one must be almost a cup and a half, at least. It's double this, and if this is 3/4 of a cup, I'm certain that it's at least a cup and a half.
Beautiful.
So I'm going to take these out. They're not brown as brown, but they're getting there. They're getting to look really super beautiful. They're getting brown, I have to say. Wow. And the pumpkin, so here, let's leave the biscuits in for a minute. I don't like doing this. This is not recommended but we're on camera, so it's okay to show. But you see the biscuit is starting to rise. Wow. Right? And the gravy is bubbling. And then this big one, this beautiful one that we have, is really starting to brown. It's really beautiful, you see. Wow. And the other one is also starting to brown and has leaked out just a little bit because I left a little hole there where the circle wasn't actually to the edge. So your goal is really to seal it with the tins of the fork so that it's sealed, so the air is trapped in there. So these probably need just another 5 minutes, and then they're ready to go. Maybe I'll post one on Instagram so everyone could see the finished thing.
That would be terrific. And just to reiterate, Carole's
and then of course the biscuit is cooking, and they're cooking, and the biscuits are, I told you they're not gigantic because we rolled them kind of flat, but the biscuits are out of this world delicious.
Do post a picture at the Veggie Vanguard for those who are on Instagram. That's where you can find the pictures of the finished piece. But they do look amazing, Carole. And
yeah, they just need 5 more minutes. And you know, Wendy, so often in these cooking demos, I like cook something ahead of time, and then I cook it, and then so that we have a substitute, so it goes right so you see the final product. But today I've eaten pot pies since Thanksgiving, actually, and I just like thought I can't have any more than I need. So sorry for not being able to show you the final, but you saw how beautiful they're looking, and they just need a few more minutes of browning.
They are beautiful, and I think we're all using our imagination anyway, just tasting them. So not to worry.
And you see, I have leftover sauce, right? And that would be delicious over rice, right? Delicious over rice. I told you that I've taken some vegetables out, which would be delicious. This could be thrown into anything, actually. A tofu scramble. This could be thrown into a veggie wrap. There's so many ideas for these vegetables. So I just want to, it's like beans with vegetable medley. I mean, this little bit of dressing would be a delicious meal with some rice. You've got lots of alternatives. I want to thank everyone from the bottom of my heart for coming not only to today's demo, but supporting Plant Powered Metro New York all year around. Whether you just show up to my demo, show up to our other programming events, and there are so many of you that have been so loyal to our Wendy and my demo that I just thank you from the bottom of my heart. Have a very, very happy, safe, healthy new year. And we will see you in January for 2023.
And I'm reiterating all of that. Thank you, everyone. A particular shout out to Carole K, who's been with us from the very, very, very beginning. Carole, I don't think you've missed one show since 2020. So thank you. And the rest of you also, I just can't see everyone who's there, of course, but thank you so much for coming. Happy holidays to everyone. Happy New Year, and see you in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.